It was the first photograph that I had ever seen, and it fascinated me. I can remember holding it at every angle in order to catch the flickering light from the oil lamp on the dresser. The man in the photograph was unsmiling, but his eyes were kind. I had never met him, but I felt that I knew him. One evening, when I was looking at the photograph, as I always did before I went to sleep, I noticed a shadow across the man's thin face. I moved the photograph so that the shadow lay perfectly around his hollow cheeks. How different he looked! That night I couldn't sleep, thinking about the letter that I would write. First, I would tell him that I was 11 years old, and that if he had a little girl my age, she could write to me instead of him. I knew that he was a very busy man. Then I would explain to him the real purpose of my letter. I would tell him how wonderful he looked with the shadow that I had seen across his photograph, and I would most carefully suggest that he grow whiskers. 4 months later, when I met him at the train station near my home in Westfield, Newark, he was wearing a full beard. He was so much taller than I had imagined from my tiny photograph. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "I have no speech to make and no time to make it in. I appear before you that I may see you and that you may see me." Then he picked me right up and kissed me on both cheeks. The whiskers scratched. "Do you think I look better, my little friend?" he asked me. My name is Grace Battle, and the man in the photograph was Abraham Lincoln. Few men have influenced the development of American English to the extent that Noah Webster did. Born in West Hartford, Connecticut in 1758, his name has become synonymous with American dictionaries. Graduated from Yale in 1778, he was admitted to the bar in 1781, and thereafter began to practice law in Hartford. Later, when he turned to teaching, he discovered how inadequate the available school books were for the children of a new and independent nation. In response to the need for truly American textbooks, Webster published a Grammatical Institute of the English Language, a 3-volume work that consisted of a speller, a grammar, and a reader. The first volume, which was generally known as the American Spelling Book, was so popular that eventually it sold more than 80 million copies and provided him with a considerable income for the rest of his life. While teaching, Webster began work on the Compendious Dictionary of the English Language, which was published in 1806. In 1807, Noah Webster began his greatest work, an American Dictionary of the English Language. In preparing the manuscript, he devoted 10 years to the study of English and its relationship to other languages, and 7 more years to the writing itself. Published in 2 volumes in 1828, an American Dictionary of the English Language has become the recognized authority for usage in the United States. Webster's purpose in writing it was to demonstrate that the American language was developing distinct meanings, pronunciations, and spellings from those of British English. He is responsible for advancing simplified spelling forms, developed instead of the British form developed, theater and center instead of theater and center, color and honor instead of color and honor. In 1840, Webster brought out a second edition of his dictionary, which included 70,000 entries instead of the original 38,000. This edition has served as the basis for the many revisions that have been produced under the Webster name. The San Andreas Fault is a fracture at the congruence of two major plates of the Earth's crust, one of which supports most of the North American continent, and the other of which underlies the coasts of California and the ocean floor of the Pacific. The fault originates about 600 miles from the Gulf of California and runs north in an irregular line along the west coast to San Francisco, where it continues north for about 200 more miles before angling into the ocean. Its western side always moves north in relation to its eastern side. Although the movement along the fault averages only a few inches a year, it is intermittent and variable. Some segments of the fault do not move at all for long periods of time, building up tremendous pressure that must be released. For this reason, tremors are not unusual along the San Andreas Fault, and some of them are classified as major earthquakes. The body of an adult insect is subdivided into a head, a thorax of 3 segments, and a segmented abdomen. Ordinarily, the thorax bears 3 pairs of legs. 1 or 2 pairs of wings may be attached to the thorax. Most adult insects have 2 large compound eyes and 2 or 3 small simple eyes. Features of the mouth parts are very helpful in classifying the many kinds of insects. A majority of insects have biting mouth parts or mandibles, as in grasshoppers and beetles. Behind the mandibles are the maxillae, which serve to direct food into the mouth between the jaws. A labrum above and a labium below are similar to an upper and lower lip. In insects with sucking mouth parts, the mandibles, maxillae, labrum, and labium are modified to provide a tube through which liquid can be drawn. In a butterfly or moth, the cold drinking tube is called the proboscis. Composed chiefly of modified maxillae fitted together, the proboscis can be extended to reach nectar deep in a flower. In a mosquito or an aphid, mandibles and maxillae are modified to sharp stylets with which the insect can drill through surfaces to reach juice. In a housefly, the expanding labium forms a spoon-like mouth and pad used to stem over the surface of food. Interest is the sum charged for borrowing money. Most of the profits for a bank are derived from the interest they charge for the use of their own or their depositors' money. All problems in interest may be solved by use one of general equation that may be stated as follows. Interest equals principal multiply rate multiply time. Any one of the four quantities, that is interest, principal, rate, or time, may be found when the other three are known. The time is expressed in commercial years. The rate is expressed as a decimal fraction. Thus, 6% interest means 6 cents charged for the use of $1 of principal borrowed for 1 year. The protozoans, minute,